Surveillance. Surveillance is the only way in our experience that you'll solve 99% of infidelity cases. Despite the fact that we live in the digital age and there's spyware and GPS monitoring and tracking and all sorts of gadgets and gizmos and things like that, the best evidence is still gathered in the old-fashioned way. Why is that? Well, in our experience, having done this work for 36 years, basically people need to see the infidelity themselves. They need to be able to see with their own eyes what's happening. Otherwise, I mean, there are probably 2 or 3 different types of people when it comes to infidelity. Some people, if they even get a feeling, they're out, they're gone, that's it, all over. They don't need private investigators. A lot of people do need proof because they love the person and they can't quite believe what's going on. They feel it. They feel it. Their intuition tells them that something is amiss, but until they actually see it with their own eyes, they're not prepared to take that leap, take that step away. Then I guess there's another kind who we've come across who, even if there is evidence of infidelity, they stay with their partner. They just want to know. So it's not. I'm not here to judge. I'm here to try and help people achieve whatever goals they have. So our job is to try and get evidence that shows definitively one way or the other whether there's infidelity going on. And so if someone asks me for some kind of tracking device or something, it's just not going to help them. Plus it's illegal in almost all circumstances. So we don't do it, we don't offer it, it's no good. You're going to get caught, he's going to find out, you're going to potentially end up in jail. So surveillance. Surveillance is an incredibly useful technique that we use in lots and lots of different circumstances, not just in infidelity, but it is by all means the most appropriate technique for use in infidelity cases, because of the fact, as we just discussed, the person needs to see the evidence themselves. So if we can obtain video evidence of the person, the suspect, the subject person, meeting with another person and acting intimately towards that person, bingo, that's what the client needs. That's what they need to have peace of mind and feel as though they understand the truth. So that's what we try and do. And the truth is that, of course, no investigator ever has a 100% success rate. But by the time a client comes to us and they have a suspicion about cheating, I don't know what the percentage is, but it's really high. I mean, it's a very high percentage of people who suspect are proven ultimately correct, whether by us or whether they find it out themselves, whether they work it out 5 years down the track, whether the person admits it, whatever. But if there is an intuition, it's a very high likelihood that the person is cheating. So in terms of our investigation strategy, the first thing we need to do is get information from the client. We can't plan a surveillance operation until we know where we're doing it, how long we're doing it for, in what circumstances are we doing it, how far is the person traveling, how many exits and entry points from the subject property are there. We need to know all these logistical factors. There is a building in the city that we've done surveillance at a few times, and it has, we think, 6 or 7 exits if you include the driveway, and each one cannot be monitored. There's if an investigator is there, he can only monitor one entry and exit. Each one is not visible. Each entry and exit is not really visible from the other one. So what that means is that you would need 6 or 7 investigators to properly monitor that building. Of course, most surveillance operations don't take place in that situation. Most surveillance operations take place in suburbia or in unit blocks or whatever. But it's always necessary for us to scope that out in the first instance so that we can look at how many entry and exit points we think there are from Google Maps and Google Street View, which is an incredibly useful tool. And then we work out, okay, we're going to need an investigator there, we're going to need an investigator there. So usually it's 1 or 2, sometimes it's 3 or 4, occasionally it's more than that. But we can't plan for the surveillance until we know those logistical details. Also, we want to know how far is this person expected to be traveling if we're going to follow them to or from work or things like that, because if they're traveling great distances and if they're a really reckless driver, it's going to be really tough to follow. There are 2 locations that are really difficult to follow in. The first one is right in the middle of a CBD in a busy place, especially, for example, Sydney and Melbourne, and especially out of those 2, Sydney, because the traffic is so bad in Sydney. And the other difficult place to follow people is right out in the bush where there's no one. If you're trying to monitor a rural property, then it's tough, because you might be there's no cars parked for 100 kilometers and you're there on the side of the road. Well, that's a bit sus. Fortunately, it seems as though there's less cheating in rural areas. I guess small towns, everyone knows each other. It's harder to get away with. So it's much more common in Sydney and Melbourne and other cities, infidelity cases. So sometimes clients are hesitant to provide us with information. They want to quote up front. Well, it's, as you can understand, if we're monitoring, let's say we take a case where a husband goes out during the day and the wife stays home and she's suspected of having an affair with the neighbour or someone down the street or a friend or something like that. If we're just monitoring the house and seeing if anyone turns up there in a normal tree-lined suburban street with plenty of parking, then probably one investigator is sufficient just to sit there and record the house, and it's a 4-hour engagement or 8-hour engagement, very easily defined, very easy to manage. Take the other end of the extreme. Let's say we were doing surveillance on this building in town that has 6 or 7 exits. If you want to do it properly, you're going to need 6 or 7 investigators. And it may be a case where we don't know much about that person's schedule, so we're going to need to be there for several days. And obviously that's going to change the budget, and that's going to change the way in which the investigation's conducted and how the level of difficulty and all those kind of factors. And we might need to think about doing other things. We might need to think about doing database searches to try and locate the other person, the other suspect, or we might need to do some kind of pretext to learn more about the person's schedule or whereabouts during the week or things like that, or database searches or whatever. So there's all these kind of considerations. Given that we've done this work for many, many years, and we've done thousands of these cases over those years, we are very, very cognizant of how these things should work and how they need to work. And as I kind of mentioned before, we have a very good success rate these days. And it's getting better and better, partly because of the fact that the clients are intuitive and they know what's going on themselves often, and partly because of the fact that we've been around a long time and our operatives are getting more and more experience, and we have more and more experience in dealing with these matters ourselves. So we know how a lot of them will turn out. Whether we get the evidence or not, we generally know the other variables involved. So that's most of the consideration. So when we have the information from the client, we can draft that strategy and we can give them a budget based on that strategy. And it's sometimes difficult to get accurate, concise information from clients. A lot of these clients are emotionally upset, or they're not thinking straight, or they're not naturally good communicators, and maybe that's why the relationship's broken down in the first place. Oftentimes we're called in because a relationship has broken down, not just in the case of infidelity, but in the case of a workplace relationship or a friendship or whatever, a business relationship. Often there's been a lack of communication, and we have to compensate for our client who's not a great communicator themselves by pushing them and prodding them and really trying to get the information that we need. So it's always important that clients take a few minutes to set out what they need, what we need, and what we need is clear and concise information as requested in our emails to them. Has to be done in email, got to be done in writing, otherwise if we do it verbally, there'll always be confusion, so it's a nightmare. So we do need an email to be able to communicate with them, or they can come into an office if they're really averse to emailing for some reason. So when we've got all that, it's straightforward. They need to take 10, 15, 20, half an hour, whatever, to sit down and write all that information, give us the information, maybe some photos, so on and so forth. When we've got that, it's over to us, and we'll tell them, this is how it'll work, this is what we suggest, this is how much it'll cost, this is how long we'll do it for, these are the circumstances in which we'll cease, so on and so forth. And when they have that, they can make a decision. Do they go ahead? Do they wait for a little while? Do they not want to go ahead? Up to them. And we don't charge for that. They just make a decision based on our proposal, and then it's up to them if they want to go ahead. Then we do the work, and we keep them updated, let them know what's going on, and then provide a detailed report and any DVD footage that's taken. So our operatives endeavour to take as much footage as possible of the subject whenever the subject's in view. If we're in our car, we take video using a normal camera. If we are on foot or in a restaurant or something like that, we take footage using a covert camera. So that's a device like a watch or something like that that is used as a camera that is not able to be recognized as a camera. And I mean, in the 10 years or so that I've been involved in the industry, I maybe once was a covert camera recognized as a camera. Almost never does it happen. Some people use their phones, some operatives use their phones. We don't want that to happen. We don't follow that protocol at Lionswood, because a phone, as soon as someone sees a phone, these days they think camera. So we want something that is not mentally connected with a camera. And we have a few devices of that nature. So, and as I said at the start, that's what the client needs to see. The client needs to see the video footage. They need to see the photos or the footage themselves, so that if there is, for example, a kiss or a hug, or if they're holding hands or walking along the beach. Sometimes, on occasion, we've had jobs where the hotel blinds are left open and we see a lot more than a kiss. It just depends what happens on the night, on the occasion that we do the surveillance. And then based on that evidence, the client makes a decision. And we're there to support them, but we're not there to judge or tell them what to think or how to feel. That's up to them, and that's their prerogative. We can give them, we can refer them to lawyers if they decide that they want to separate. And it's very important in infidelity cases, to the extent that it's possible, that the person, our client, does not confront their partner. And that's a natural emotional response when they feel as though the other person's doing the wrong thing. But they put themselves at a significant strategic disadvantage if they confront their partner. If they confront their partner's going to know that our client is suspicious. And you can imagine that the subject person is going to change their behaviour. They're going to become more furtive in their movements. They're going to become more wary. They're going to be looking over their shoulder. They're going to be, concealing their calls. It's going to be harder to catch that person out. So although it's a natural emotional response, we always say to our clients, look, don't confront them, don't change your behaviour, don't ask too many questions, don't do anything that's going to put the person on notice, because to do all that kind of stuff is a strategic mistake. Not only might it cost you your chance of getting the evidence of infidelity, if the subject person is hiding assets or concealing income or doing something like that, it's potentially also going to have a really negative impact on the family law settlement, the financial settlement. And from our perspective, that's another important consideration in these matters, is if there's going to be a settlement, which there often is, if the couple is a married couple. May not be if it's just a new relationship, but if it's a married couple or a de facto relationship, then there could be serious finances involved. And one of the things that unfortunately we deal with reasonably regularly are cases where there's a mother with kids and there's a father who's on a big salary and he is cheating or has cheated, and he loses interest in the relationship and the family, and he's earning big money, and he ends up hiding the money and hiding the assets that she didn't have any access to or control over, and she ends up with custody of the kids with no income, no assets or few assets, and he's off scot-free, hiding his assets or doing whatever. So they're difficult situations. And if we can do the infidelity investigation, sometimes at the same time we can kind of do some form of asset check. And it's a lot easier for us to do certain types of asset checks when the partners are together. So it's always important. That's another reason why it's important not to let emotions get the better of the client, let the client approach it in a logical way to the extent possible, and let us help with that, because obviously the vast majority of them are going to be emotional and they're going to be wondering what to do. Well, speak to an expert, let them help you through the whole process. They'll know about the best way to get the evidence of the infidelity. They'll know about the best way to get evidence of hidden assets. We'll be able to put you in touch with a good lawyer so we can take you step by step.